Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Ray continues to talk about the destructive power of bitterness in his chapter on the challenge of Christian freedom on page 649. Thankfully, many, including some who have lost the most, do not allow bitterness to gain a foothold in their hearts. If they love freedom, they cannot afford to do so. Bitterness, rancor, vindictiveness are crippling emotions, not liberating emotions. Along with the constant striving for retaliation, they foment. They are evidence that one is still a prisoner, still shackled to the past. Years ago, a friend gave me a copy of material appearing in an article in Time magazine. Among other things, it contained these penetrating and beautifully expressed thoughts on the power of forgiveness. Now here's the quote from Time magazine. The Old Testament view of forgiveness was contained in a verb that dominates its penitential literature. The Hebrew word shuv means to turn, to return. The doctrine implies that man has the power to turn from evil to good, to change, and the very act of turning will bring God's forgiveness. Those who do not forgive are those who are least capable of changing the circumstances of their lives.
The quote goes on, the psychological case for forgiveness is overwhelmingly persuasive. Not to forgive is to be imprisoned by the past, by old grievances that do not permit life to proceed with new business. Not to forgive is to yield oneself to another's control. If one does not forgive, then one is controlled by the other's initiatives and is locked into a sequence of act and response, of outrage and revenge, tit for tat, escalating always. The present is endlessly overwhelmed and devoured by the past. Forgiveness frees the forgiver. It extracts the forgiver from someone else's nightmare. Unless there is a breach with the evil past, says Donald Shriver, all we get is this stuttering repetition of evil. Forgiveness is not an impulse that is much in favor, or in much favor. It is a mysterious and sublime idea. In many ways, forgiveness does not look much like a tool for survival in a bad world, but that is what it is.
That kind of reminds me of there's been a lot of accounts of people who've done violent crime, even killing people, and then when it's brought before the trial, the family members are allowed to come forward and say the impact of this on them, and a lot of the Christian ones that have told them the impact have also included forgiveness to the person who committed the crime.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made the news in a lot of cases because it is not understood by some, and also even resented by some. Some will criticize it and think this is just not right. You can't forgive them. They've killed your son or daughter or whatever. They'll be kind of upset that someone would forgive. But it is the Christian method, and it is the way in which to not be eaten alive by hatred, I would say.
And it's a witness to the world.
Yes.
Because they find it so unusual. I'm reminded of the story that Nikki Haley tells, who when she was governor of South Carolina, was governor when that case happened in the Charleston church, where 12 black worshipers in a Bible study were gunned down, and how that family came into the court case and forgave. Yeah. And what a tremendous witness that was to the world. And obviously Nikki Haley herself was greatly impacted by it. Now, Ray goes on talking about Carl Olof Johnson.
Right. Back in 1982, I first began personal correspondence with Carl Olof Johnson in Sweden. In an early letter, after mentioning some among former witnesses who seemed to feel obliged to take an opposite viewpoint of everything they had previously stood for or believed, he added, quote, "They have not really left the Watchtower movement. They are still as fixed to it as ever, inversely fixed to it. Often they spend the rest of their lives in attacking it. I could understand if they kindly tried to help the witnesses, but very often they are filled with bitterness." And that's the end of Johnson's quote.
Ray goes on, "I can understand the sense of indignation, often motivated by compassion for others, felt by many at the destructive hurt that certain organizational policies have produced, even ones having a burning desire to try to bring an end to that hurt. I also believe, however, that it is a grave mistake to think that the end justifies the means. There's nothing dishonorable or unloving in refutation of falsehood, nor is it evidence of animosity toward anyone to disagree with him or to place before him the evidence of the erroneous nature of beliefs or practices he may hold. It can be a loving act, but the way in which it is done, the spirit in which it is done, is the determinative factor. I cannot possibly view some methods employed as genuinely reflective of the approach and spirit of God's Son and the tenor of his message to his disciples."
Yeah.
Which brought to mind for me Ephesians 6, where Paul, who obviously had every reason to hate those who hated him, because of not just the impact upon his ministry, but they left him for dead several times, or tried to kill him several times. But nevertheless, he felt he had to tell his fellow Christians that they should pay close attention to who their real enemies are. So I thought to read Ephesians 6 verses 10 to 13, where Paul lays this all out for us, because all of us who are persecuted for the sake of Jesus' name will have reason to resent.
Yeah, and we may target the wrong thing. "Finally, go on acquiring power in the Lord and in the mightiness of his strength. Put on the complete suit of armor from God, that you may be able to stand firm against the machinations of the devil. Because we have a wrestling, not against blood and flesh, but against the governments, against the authorities, against the world rulers of this darkness, against the wicked spirit forces in heavenly places. On this account, take up the complete suit of armor from God, that you may be able to resist in the wicked day, and after you have done all things thoroughly, to stand firm."
So it seems that Paul's argument is along the lines of our real enemies are those manipulating the pieces that are in front of our eyes, whether they be Watchtower or human governments or even enemies of Christianity on the ground. They are not the real enemy. They are being manipulated. They are victims. And so I can't also help but reflect upon the fact that so many of the ex-witness community seem to really resent and even hate the present governing body or the last generation or so of governing body members, but don't seem to get it that they are the fruit, not the root. The root
Right.
is Russellism, Rutherfordism, and everything up to the 1990s. We're just seeing the inevitable bitter fruit of the wrong decisions that Russell and Rutherford made generations ago.
Yeah. It was Russell and Rutherford that broke away, well, Russell particularly, broke away from all Christian contact with the world church, if you like. He's the one that broke away from them and decided that he and his group alone
Yeah.
were the right group. And this is the fruit of that. So we don't take it far enough back.
The megalomania of the present governing body is just a return to the megalomania of Charles Taze Russell and Rutherford.
Yeah.
So I wanted to link on your screen a video that we shot about Vivian's tears, about one of your favorite passages.
One that always makes me cry. Romans 9, the beginning of Romans 9.
And why is that? What's that got to do with this?
Because Paul, who was being attacked by his fellow Jews when he became Christian, his feelings are in those first verses. His
Yeah.
feelings for these people because they are his own people. And that's the way I've always felt about the witnesses. So I have a tender heart for witnesses because they're my people. That's the same feeling that you have.
We also wanted to link, in addition to Vivian's tears, a video on Paul's last visit to Jerusalem, because Paul's custom was to visit the synagogues. I think I've just misled somebody. I'm not here talking about the last visit. This is Paul's custom before that. But he used to go habitually to every synagogue in every city where he could find a synagogue. So he wasn't going to let his persecution, his personal feelings about his persecutors, get in the way of loving Jews the way they needed to be loved. To take the gospel to them, even at the cost occasionally, quite often, of his own danger, putting himself in danger's way. So that's Paul's custom, going to the synagogues, and that's something, again, you don't notice when you're a witness, that's what he does in every large city.
So I think Ray is getting what he's getting at in this is it's the way and the tone of voice, the spirit behind the way you try to reach witnesses that makes a big difference in it being receptive.
Yeah. Next time, Ray talks about publicity, and he obviously has very strong opinions about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate after you leave the Watchtower. In what ways should you criticize the Watchtower, and what ways perhaps you should avoid?